What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? Is Roki Sasaki on a collision course for the NL West? And should the Dbacks go with a six-man rotation in 2025?
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas, multimedia journalist, and I'm a graphic designer. So please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bucks. Get $200 in bonus bets. Guaranteed win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Sorry, the copy said $200 in bonus bets, and that thing in my mind was just such a tongue twister. I could not get it out. So you get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed win or lose, from FanDuel.com. So go on there to get started. On today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, we are discussing, is Roki Sasaki on a collision course for the NL West based off the teams who are finalists for his services? Can Gabriel Moreno crack the top 5 of catchers next season, as he debuted this season in the top 10? Well, I guess he didn't debut. He was a top 10 catcher last year, but MLB Network just dropped their top 10 catchers right now, according to the Shredder. So we'll see where Moreno ends up and if he can crack the top 5 next year. So that at least gives you a little sneak peek that he wasn't top 5 in 2024. And then we'll wrap up the podcast discussing, should the Dbacks go with a 6-man rotation in 2025? So thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. Now let's get into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, and let's discuss Roki Sasaki if he's on a collision course for the NL West, because he's not come to the Dbacks, folks. Unfortunately, we know at the winter meetings, it sounded like, based off the reporting, Roki was the Dbacks' number 1 target. Mike Hazen was doing a full-on court press for Roki back in December, but Dbacks never got a meeting with him, and they didn't need a meeting with him after getting Corbin Burnes. They were very content with their rotation, and so the idea of Roki coming to Arizona, you guys can squash it. I've made the case. Go look at a podcast I did a month ago. I thought the Dbacks had one of the strongest cases on the market for Roki to come to Arizona, because why join the Dodgers? Why not beat the Dodgers by playing for the little brother Dbacks, who beat the Dodgers not too long ago in the postseason? But Dbacks graciously bowed out of the competition once they signed Corbin Burnes. And so right now, you look at who's the finalist that's left for Roki, and it's down to 3 teams. And sadly, 2 of the 3 teams are in the NL West. We know the LA Dodgers are up there, who seem like they are probably favorites considering of the amount of talent and the Japanese stars they already have on their roster. The San Diego Padres are right there. And then the mystery dark horse team that we really have to watch out for is the Toronto Blue Jays, because it sounds like the Blue Jays were the only team that got a meeting with Roki outside of LA. I think they met with him in Canada. And so you do have to watch out for those 3 teams. And looking at the suitors for Roki Sasaki, I think all D-backs fans are essentially saying anyone but the Dodgers, right? Like, that is, of course, worst case scenario. Hit DEFCON 1. Like, the Dodgers getting Roki Sasaki is just massive with the talent that they already have. It would be embarrassing to Major League Baseball. Obviously, the Dodgers wouldn't have done anything wrong. They would have followed all the rules, yada, yada. It just would have been overkill seeing Roki go to a rotation that is just way too loaded already. It just wouldn't be fun. But again, baseball is a sport where there are no guarantees. Yes, the Dodgers won it this past year, but there was also plenty of moments where a team like the Padres should have beat them in the postseason. And so again, baseball is still a high variance sport. So even if they got Roki Sasaki, I'm not going to sit up here and act like it's like when KD went to the Warriors, because I think in basketball, the best talent typically wins out. That doesn't always happen in baseball. So I will be upset if the Dodgers get Roki, but it won't be to the level of KD going to the Warriors. I won't have that much animosity for the Dodgers. I mean, they're already extremely stacked, extremely loaded. And if I didn't feel that way already when they got the Otanis, the Betts, the Freddie Freemans, I'm not going to get more upset when they add Roki Sasaki to the mix. But definitely want him to go anywhere but LA Dodgers. Him going to the San Diego Padres, I think, would be the most fun scenario. It would still hurt the Dbacks, of course, because it would be coming to the NL West. But in terms of in-division narratives, the crossovers with Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres, talking with Ben Caspick of Locked On Giants, who they missed out on Corbin Burns, they missed out on Roki Sasaki being like the fourth team in the NL West when you see the other three teams just thriving. Those crossovers would be fun. Of course, we love our crossovers with Paul Holden, Locked On Rockies. We need to do more with Locked On Dodgers going forward. But Roki going to the Padres just for the four teams at the top of the division, and especially the three teams, D-backs, Padres, and Dodgers. Super fun in season fight for the NL West division crown. Dodgers, of course, still would be heavy favorites, but just the competition between those three teams all season long mixed in with the Giants would be a ton of fun. Now, Toronto, that of course would be best case scenario for the D-backs. You go to the other league. We would barely see you throughout this season. Like, we wouldn't face you in the postseason until we faced off in the World Series if both of our teams got there. So the worst case scenario is the Dodgers. The best case scenario for the D-backs is the Blue Jays. And the most fun scenario is the San Diego Padres. Now, if he went to the Dodgers, think about that rotation that they would have. Like, the Dodgers are already expected to do a six-man rotation in 2025, but if you added Roki, like, you already have Glass now, Ohtani, Snell, Yamamoto as your top four locked in. Like, any other team in baseball, any one of those starters could be the number one starter for that team. Like, those are four number ones. And then to round out the rest of that four mix is Tony Gonsolin, who we've seen be a Cy Young candidate, and then Dustin May, who's like the best pitcher who doesn't pitch in Major League Baseball. Absolutely filthy, but just consistently hurt. And so that's six starters right now. You're telling me you're going to add Roki Sasaki? Like, who are you kicking out when you get to the playoffs? Is it Ohtani just because he's also a hitter? I guess. Maybe, maybe not. Like, when you look at the Dodgers, everyone except for May is going to be under contract for next season. So it's a good problem to have, having too many stars, but there's actually not enough spots in the rotation if the Dodgers kept everyone. So if they did sign Roki Sasaki, they would probably have to trade one of their starters. The Padres, if they added Roki, they would have Cease, Michael King, Yu Darvish, and Roki as a big four. That is definitely a World Series rotation mixed in with the Tatis and the Machado potential bounce back. Like, the Padres would be cooking if they got Roki. And the other reason why they probably want him is because Dylan Cease and Michael King are both expected to be free agents next year, probably will leave the Padres, who have made some questionable money decisions the last couple years with handing out big contracts to Bogarts, and then you trade for Soto, then you trade away Soto, you give Machado $300 million. Like, just a lot of money being thrown around the Padres. And I don't know if it's always smart money being thrown around, but if you are able to bring in Roki Sasaki, it will definitely uplift the rotation if guys like Michael King and Yu Darvish leave. Then Toronto, if they added Roki, the rotation would actually be pretty stacked. Kevin Gausman, Chris Bassett, and Jose Barrios with Roki is a pretty nasty top four. Their lineup, a lot of variance, a lot of inconsistency. Definitely need to have a big year next year if you're Toronto, because you know who's a pending free agent, who's going to be the number one guy in the free agent class of 2025, Vlad Guerrero Jr. And of course, the D-backs are going to have first base open again with Josh Naylor next year being a free agent. So I'm not saying Arizona's going to get him, but he's probably going to leave Toronto if they don't have a good year, especially if a big market team like the Giants, who have been waiting to get a star, if they come out and just throw Vladdy the bag. Would not be surprised if Vladdy wants to play in the States as opposed to playing in Canada. But looking at these three teams, if we're all being truthful about what we want Roki Sasaki to do, and if Roki is truthful about what he's been saying, because he's been talking about how he doesn't want to go to a big market. He's been saying how he wants to go to a mid-sized market to start off. And so if that's the case, I believe Roki, despite everyone thinking he's going to go to the LA Dodgers, they are just actually too loaded in their rotation actually a logjam, actually not even a place for him to pitch. Like, you're going to sell to Roki, hey, come be the number 3, number 4, number 5 starter in this Dodgers rotation that's going to be the same starters for the next couple of years. Like, I actually don't think that's a great pitch. That's why I think the Padres are the most likely team to sign him. You get to come to San Diego, mid-sized market, great city still. We have you, Darvish. You have that Japanese connection already. And then also don't forget, I also think the pitch of let's steal the spotlight away from the Japanese stars of the Dodgers is way more fun and exciting than joining the Japanese stars. Like, do you want to be the third star of a big three, like the third star behind Otani, Yamamoto? Like, do you want to be a third star, or do you want to be the star in San Diego that steals and beats Otani and Yamamoto? I think that's a way bigger sell than actually joining those two guys. So if I had to choose where Roki Sasaki's going to go, or Roki Sasaki, I believe he's going to sign with the San Diego Padres this offseason. Now, I wanted to discuss MLB Network just dropped their top 10 catchers list. Gabriel Moreno was outside the top 5, but can he crack the top 5 in 2025? The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up the W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It's thrilling. My favorite thing to do on the FanDuel Sportsbook app is the same game parlay. When I see that Arizona Cardinals are playing, sometimes I like to do a little Cardinals money line, give me a little James Conner over on rushing touchdowns, and give me Kyler Murray anytime touchdown. When that 3-leg hits, it brings a big smile to my face. So if you want a big smile on your face, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more at FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right. Let's get back to the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. Let's discuss, can Gabriel Moreno creep into the top 5 catchers for 2025? Because MLB Network, as they like to do during the offseason, because we know news content gets slow in the offseason, so sometimes you just got to make some stuff up. And they have this little thing called the Shredder, which is this, I don't know, AI algorithm, which takes offense and defense of what the player did this past season and projects out what they're going to do for next year and tells you the top 10 players at each position for right now based off the season they just had and how they think they're going to perform next year. And so for the top 10 catchers right now after 2024, entering 2025, they believe Gabriel Moreno is number 7 among all catchers in Major League Baseball, moving him up 3 spots from number 10 after his 2023 season where he won Gold Glove and was phenomenal behind the plate. And so he moved up 3 spots. I think part of it is because some guys that were higher on the list last year moved behind him. And then also, I think Gabriel Moreno has shown that if he can be healthy for like 130, 140 games, there is some offensive potential there with Gabriel Moreno. And I think that's probably where he has to tap into if he wants to go to the next level and become a top 5 catcher in the sport. Because right now, when you discuss Moreno and what he's done so far in Major League Baseball, like, he's already established himself as one of the best defensive catchers behind the sport. We know in 2023, that first full season with the Dbacks, it was like 40% of the time or something. Like, he threw out opposing base runners. Like, his defense is absolutely insane. He was a Gold Glove finalist this past year, finishing second despite playing under 100 games defensively. And we know this D-backs pitching staff way better when we look at the ERAs when Gabriel is behind the plate versus anyone else. It's almost like over a point difference. Like, it's dramatic when Gabriel is behind the plate versus anyone else. So from a catching, defense, blocking the plate, throwing out runners, like, he's as fundamentally sound as anyone. Go listen to Alex Avila on MLB Network. When he talks about Gabriel Moreno, he just gushes about his fundamentals behind the plate because he is that strong defensively. And so when discussing Gabriel Moreno becoming a top 5 catcher for next year, there's already skills there that are translatable that he just has to build upon. When we look at his offensive skill set, what does he already do a great job at? Plate discipline. When looking at Gabby, this is a guy who does not strike out a ton, and he also draws a decent amount of walks as well. You look at his K rate in his career, 17%, and this past year, 14.8%, with a career high walk rate of 11.7%. So his strikeout rate and his walk rate aren't that far apart, and that is a huge sign. He had 41 walks compared to 52 strikeouts. This is a guy, he does not chase pitches, does not swing at things outside the strike zone. Elite plate discipline like him and Geraldo Perdomo, elite at plate discipline. And we know the bat to ball skills really strong for Gabriel as well. Career 280 hitter. Like, he has great base level offense when you think about his contact, his plate discipline, like all that looked very good. And when looking at some of the projections for Gabriel Moreno moving forward for next season, according to like FanGraphs, like they project him to be like the sixth best catcher next season already, taking his offense and defense into consideration. And so if he's already projected to be the sixth best catcher based off what he's already done, what does Gabriel Moreno need to continue to do to crack that top five? Because when looking at him right now, that 280 number is nice. The plate discipline numbers are all nice, but there's two different paths he needs to go down as an offensive player to really move into that top five of catchers in Major League Baseball. And it's either adding more power to his plate, because currently he has 13 home runs in his entire Major League career. In 804 play appearances, he only has 13 home runs. And so he needs to be a guy that's, around 15 home runs, maybe not 25, but if he could get to 12 to 15 home runs and add a little bit more pop, get to around 70 RBIs, like that would definitely help his offensive trajectory and move him into that top five of catchers, considering where his defense is already. I think the other path he can go, if he doesn't add the power, if the power is never a path that's really available for him, if he's just one of those guys that can't do it, doesn't have the body build, doesn't have the kind of swing for it, I think the other path he could go down as an offensive player is basically being like Luis Ariz, like being the Luis Ariz of catchers, where you bat like 300, maybe your OPS is only around 750, but you get on base a good amount, you don't strike out. Like that's the thing with Luis Ariz. In his career, 6 years, he has 196 walks to 194 strikeouts. He has more walks than strikeouts in his career. And if Gabriel Moreno could get closer to that kind of ratio with a way higher batting average, like that plays. Maybe he doesn't have the power, but if he's the Luis Ariz of catchers from an offensive standpoint, but then Buster Posey with the defensive glove, like that all of a sudden is a dual threat player, someone they could put at the top of your lineup. And that's why when you look at Moreno's numbers last year after June 1st, this guy went on a tear. And that's why in the month of August, we saw him batting second so much, because 16 games batting second last year, 415 average, 1075 OPS. And so Moreno could be a little Luis Ariz type near the top of your lineup, just smashing singles and doubles. We know he's been a pretty solid guy with runners in scoring position as well in the clutch. And so for Moreno right now, either add more pop or become Luis Ariz. And if you could do that, you could definitely become a top five catcher in Major League Baseball. JT Realmuto, he's getting older. I definitely think Moreno could be ahead of him next season. And then you even look at some of the other guys on the list who are ahead of him. Their WAR really wasn't even that much different than Gabriel Moreno. Moreno had a 2.6 WAR on Baseball Reference in 97 games. Adley Rutschman, who is the number 2 catcher, had a 3.4 WAR. You know how many games he played? 148. Will Smith, I believe, had a 3.5 WAR, and he played like 100 and how many games did Will Smith play last year? He played 128 games. And so like all these guys had a WAR that was less than one win in terms of closeness to Gabriel Moreno's WAR, and yet they played like 30 to 50 more games than Gabriel. Like JT Realmuto, I mean, he only played 2 more games than Gabriel Moreno, but did have a 30 WAR. And so when look at the guys that had a Moreno, like their WAR really wasn't that much different despite playing a lot more games. And so a Moreno can either tap into more power next season or become just a more overall consistent hitter to the point where he's like a Luis Ariz type. If he can go down either of those paths as an offense player with how good his defense is already fundamentally, Gabriel Moreno will definitely be a top 5 catcher in 2025 if he's able to do that. Now we'll talk about if the D-backs should go with a 6-man rotation in 2025. And if you're looking to buy tickets to an upcoming sport or an event, then the best place to do that, of course, is going to be Game Times, because Game Time is the best place for last minute deals on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They have this feature called All In Pricing. When you toggle this feature on, it shows you your total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You get a panoramic view from your seat before you buy. They also have the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. All right. Let's get back to the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Let's discuss, should the D-backs go with a 6-man rotation in 2025? Now, this is something that I think we're going to see more and more in Major League Baseball, because it's something that's being talked about. And you look at the numbers, the stats, and they all show not just a trend, but a movement to what teams are doing. We know teams across sports are becoming more health conscious about their players. You see it in basketball with load management and all the rules they made over the last 20 or 30 years. You see it in football with all the ways that they're now protecting their quarterbacks and different ways they're protecting, receivers going over the middle. And you see it in baseball too, right? And I think one of the new things that we're going to, it's not even new, but one of the things we're going to see more of in Major League Baseball is a 6-man rotation going forward. I want to ask if the D-backs should go with a 6-man rotation in 2025, because there are going to be other teams in baseball doing this. The Dodgers have discussed and have said they're going to do it. We'll see if they do. They might be doing a 7-man rotation if they sign Roki, but Dodgers are expected to do it. The Red Sox are expected to potentially do it. The Mets might do it as well. Like, we've seen some teams do it the last few years, and we're going to see some teams do it in 2025. And it's a trend that should not be taken lightly. MLB Network, actually, I was reading an article where they said 2021 season was the first time where we saw more starters be on 5 days rest than 4 days rest, which basically means, if it's a normal rotation, starters pitch every 4 days, but we saw more starters pitch every 5 days than ever before. For the first time ever, we saw more starters pitch on 5 days rest than 4 days rest. And then guess what? In 2022, it happened again. In 2023, it happened again. And so this is something that we're seeing more and more in Major League Baseball. And I think we have to, not 2022, in 21, 23, and 24, there was more starters on 5 days rest than 4 days rest. Just wanted to get that fact out correctly. I think we're going to see it more going forward in 2025 and the years past it. And for the D-backs, I actually believe it would be a smart decision for them to also go with a 6-man rotation. Now, when asking this question to the audience, I'm not asking you guys through the prism of health or even effectiveness. Like, should the D-backs do this to preserve the arm of Corbin Burns? Should this do this so we can make sure Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly are more effective in the postseason? That is not why I'm asking this, because, guys, if we're being honest, there is not enough concrete evidence that will even suggest 6-man rotations lead to better health and better effectiveness over the course of a long term. Logically, it makes sense that it would, but the evidence right now concretely does not show that. All we can really say right now is, when you look at minor league baseball, when you look at Japanese baseball, when you look at college baseball, all those different variations of what we love to see, all those guys, those starters pitch on more than 4 days rest. College guys pitch on 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 days rest. Starters in Japan go once a week. And so the idea that Major League Baseball is going to do more of this would just fall along with what we're already seeing across different avenues of baseball being played already. And if we're honestly talking about why we're seeing pitchers get more injured in today's game. I think is more has to do with the specialization at a young age, right? More repetition from a young age, the all year nature that we now see in youth sports. These guys trying to maximize velocity. Like, I think all those reasons are more aligned as to why we see more injuries today, as opposed to guys are just, pitching more. I think it's more having to do with stuff earlier when you're a youngster than as opposed to things happening right now. But from the D-back standpoint, not from a health, not from an effectiveness, from how the roster is currently constructed, do you guys think the D-backs should go with the 6-man rotation? Don't be afraid to put in the YouTube comment section, because I'm saying yes. If we go into the next season with the roster constructed as it is, I think we have to go with the 6-man rotation, because right now we have too many guys, right? Gallen, Burns, Kelly, and Fott, to me, are locks. The top 3 definitely are. Maybe Fott is a little bit more like a 90% lock, but to me, he's a lock. So that's already 4 guys in your rotation. Then you still have Jordan Montgomery, who was a number 1, number 2 starter for a team that won a World Series 2 years ago. Got Ryan Nelson, who was your best starter last year for 15 starts in the second half of the season. And then you got Erod, who is your second highest paid starter, making like $20 million a year. And so you have 3 guys that have to go into your final spot of your rotation. So that's 7 guys right there. So even if we didn't trade Jordan Montgomery, I still believe a 6-man rotation would be the best thing for us, because I still would like Monty in the rotation as a starter, because this is still someone, despite being terrible in 2024, I know he was bad. He was so good his 3 seasons prior to coming to Arizona. I would like to still believe he can bounce back in a big way. Erod is just getting paid way too much money. He has to be a starter. And so that's already 6 guys in the rotation. And so now you put Ryan Nelson in the bullpen. Despite him being the best starter for the D-backs last year, I want him in the bullpen as a break glass in case of emergency. If Erod gives up 2 home runs in those first 2 innings, or if Monty has one of those first inning meltdowns, Ryan Nelson, you're coming in and you're making 5 inning start out the bullpen. So that's why I would love a 6-man rotation. If we kept Monty, I would love Ryan Nelson as that emergency option out the bullpen. And then let's say we trade Jordan Montgomery. We still go with a 6-man rotation with Ryan Nelson now in the rotation. I would still like that, because now there's less guys in the bullpen that I have to worry about that I don't like, right? Now, when I look at the bullpen, there's going to be only 7 guys in there. And right now, there's, I think, 5 guys who are a lock for the D-backs bullpen next season. You got J-Mart, you got Puck, you got Ginkle, you got Ryan Thompson, Joe Manthly. Those are 5 guys. Everyone else, if we don't make any of their additions this offseason, is a question mark in that bullpen, right? Whether it's Gilbert Diaz or whatever guy we traded for this offseason or picked up off the waiver wire, like, it's big question marks. And so with a 6-man rotation, I basically go from 3 question marks with 8 men in the bullpen to only 2 question marks with 7 men in the bullpen, because now I have Ryan Nelson as my 6th man in the rotation. The math I'm basically doing is I would much rather have Ryan Nelson get the ball as a starter for 5 innings every 6th day than give a really bad reliever like 30 innings pitched throughout the course of a season. I would just much rather Ryan Nelson have those innings. And so that is my rationale. Whether we keep Jordan Montgomery, whether we trade Jordan Montgomery, the D-backs just have way too many starters either way. And because of it, I actually think it would be a very smart, very logical decision by Arizona to go with a 6-man rotation in 2025. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news, coverage, and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.